Kaeli.
Hey, Kara.
Thank you so much for joining me today to talk about maternal mental health. I know that we're going to have a brief conversation and we'll really only graze the tip of the iceberg, specifically regarding advocacy for maternal mental health in hospital and birthing settings. But before we dive into the topic, I was hoping that maybe we could anchor our audience in getting to know a little bit about you and why I wanted to have this conversation with you. So, if you'd be willing to share maybe a few different ways that you intersect personally and professionally with maternal mental health concerns, we'd love to hear about it.
So my name is Kaeli Sutton. As I think about how I came into this work and how it connects to my life, the first thing I think that comes up for me is just that I am a mother and have walked this journey on my own, both in terms of the enormous impact in one's life of having a child and becoming a parent, and then in navigating my own mental health and wellness through the process. Not long after I became a mother, I have an almost 21-year-old son. When he was about 9 months old, I came into the beginnings of my work with families that were pregnant, birthing, or had recently had a child. And in the 20 years that have passed, more and more over the years, that has become my specialty. I run a wellness center for expecting, birthing, and new families that is really a freestanding, independent, holistic wellness center. And that work over decades now, which feels funny to say, has put me in a day in, day out contact with families going through this massive, powerful transition in life, and has allowed me to witness families over an extended amount of time, rather than what may happen in a more medicalized setting or a appointment setting. That kind of seeing people in the context of their whole life and getting to witness transition over time is really where my awareness that advocacy was vital, advocacy for families was vital, arose, I would say, or where it became more clear and concrete in my awareness.
Can you name the professional hats that you wear that enabled you to do this kind of advocacy? Like, what are the ways exactly that you work with families?
Yeah, I came into my work with families first as a trained massage therapist, therapeutic body worker, and as a trained movement practitioner. So I began and continue to work with families around physical health, comfort through body work and through movement and yoga education. And as I did that and families began to disclose and share more of what they needed, I became interested in working as a birth and postpartum doula or a birth companion, to support families through that process, but also so that what I was offering in my other work was more in tune with what a family was experiencing.
Mhm.
And then became a childbirth educator, which seemed really important for specifically helping families navigate their own needs and their own changes within the broader system. And I would add to that that I myself have a child who was very ill for many years and had to learn, in the moment, to navigate medical systems around something that was the most important thing in my life. And I think my childbirth education and doula work in part came out of recognizing how vital it is that families have resources as they're moving through systems that are ostensibly there for their support, but also, and are there for their support, but also leave gaps and holes through drawbacks of the system itself, or just lack of awareness or holding the whole picture that is happening.
So you're talking about advocating, and it's so inspiring, Kaeli, to see how you kept learning more and more to be able to serve the families that you work with through this period of this perinatal period. And I'm curious if succinctly you could name for us what are the primary needs for advocacy that you were seeing?
I would say broadly that uh, one of the greatest needs is that a family be seen not as a body going through this process or a mind going through this process or a relationship, but be seen holistically as people that are changing
Mm,
physically, emotionally, in identity, in relationship, in how they are seen and see the world, that overarching container of seeing people within the context of their life and their relationships um, unintentionally is left out of a lot of the care that's given or through challenges of delivery of care, whatever the reasons are.
mhm,
Um, I would say that most of my advocacy at the heart is about calling people back to human centered or family centered care. That is not what I see commonly there for people. And I am somebody who has struggled with depression my entire life, probably dealt with some level of early postpartum depression that I think is quite normal. And where I say probably was that is because I think the changes of matrescence or putrescence or becoming a parent create a space where there is so much change that whether that tips into feeling or being depressed, whether that tips into anxiety, we're
mm,
all, as we make that transition, somewhere in this state of deep transformation.
mm,
So I think that I experienced because I had a family that was able to come and support uh, my new young family after the birth. I experienced a lot of container and cushioning for my young family to land in that had
mm.
I not had, uh, it was hard enough with that. And I struggled enough to learn my new self with all of those supports around me. I
Mhm,
see so few of those supports either in Americans' expectations of what the postpartum time is or in
mm.
what our society expects and provides. So I think a lot of my advocacy work also comes out of seeing the many places that we don't offer the rightful container and supports for families that sets them up to struggle.
I'm curious, when you advocate for families in hospital and birthing settings, when you humanize the experience the way you've described, when you're speaking up for people during this transformational period, um, what have been your main concerns about using your voice and your privilege when you're speaking up for diverse groups of birthing people whose needs maybe aren't always being met within existing institutional frameworks, especially hospital settings, medical settings where most births are happening?
I think there are like two main threads for this. One is that if there is a way that I can connect families to advocate, a professional that is more well versed in really hearing them deeply, I make those connections and I don't try to be that person
Mm-hmm.
for a million reasons. I also, this is not the second piece, this is piece one and a one and a quarter. I also continue to do my own study and research and learning and participating in community things and listening around topics that are key in communities in my that key for people that I might interface with or might come to me for support who have
Mhm.
potentially really different life experience or needs than I'm have experienced or am aware of. The other piece, which I sort of ended at, is that probably like the most vital tool uh, and skill that I come back to over and over again is honing and honing and honing my capacity to listen more deeply in many different ways to hopefully increase my capacity to really hear what a family or parent that I'm working with is saying to me and needs so that I can hold that as they go into other systems or institution based setting, society support center based setting, so that I can hold a deeper hearing of the family and then use my skill set as somebody who has studied the things I've studied, traveled in the worlds I've traveled in, has spent time living in other cultures, which I think is a big part of what feeds this, so that I can take my ability to hear different languages and messaging from systems, communicate with the other people they're interfacing with, and try to bring what those people are saying into a language that the family can potentially hear, and trying to bring what the family is saying to a language that those whoever they're interfacing with can hear, so that they're actually meeting in understanding, and deeper listening rather than assumptions in either direction. So it's almost
Mhm.
as I said bridge before, but a communication dash listening facilitator.
Mhm. Like a
Uh,
conduit.
yeah, I've done as much study and listening to people within the systems as I have the families. Because if
Mm.
I don't understand the pressures that practitioners are working with under, or the questions they have, or the pressures they're sitting with, if I don't also have a picture of what they're holding, I can't be that conduit. And I think some of the times what I offer for families is not that the system can necessarily be changed in that moment. It takes a long time to change systems in healthy ways and effective ways. It's probably the hardest thing there is to do, whether it's an internal personal system or a huge societal system. But if a family better understands why something is happening in a certain way, they both can have a place to figure out where their voice is. And if there isn't a place that their voice can change what's happening, it can be less overwhelming or traumatic in the extreme sense, because
Mm.
rather than being perceived as this was done to me as a human because people didn't care or because their intent was malicious, it can be understood. For example, that person was trapped in the system. Somebody that can translate the system in either direction, I would consider is also an aspect of harm reduction, because when the forces on both systems are better understood, then the impacts can be shifted in there.
Mhm. Mhm. It does make sense. It's making it less personal. It's helping people. It's just kind of orienting people to the systems that they exist and operate inside of. Makes it less personal, which I can imagine, as a and mental health practitioner, that kind of naming the system, taking it out of the personal level, can have some kind of an impact on the mental health outcome of the experience, in terms of what kind of a lasting imprint it leaves on the person and their family.
Absolutely, because it changes the meaning. We all make meaning of our experiences all the time. That's what we do, and it can totally change the meaning we make when we understand a little bit more about what was creating what happened in there.
You spoke to it already about how changing systems is a long-term project, right? Advocacy happens in tiny little steps that over time builds up the momentum to make these larger systemic shifts. So sometimes the advocacy we're doing now will maybe change something far into the future for a generation that doesn't even exist yet. But I'm curious in terms of how much investment you've made with your own advocacy. What do you envision changing? What do you envision shifting in the future? What kind of impact would you hope that your work is making for the mental and emotional well-being of birthing people and their families?
Well, it's like so huge and so simple all at the same time. I would like to see that our systems and our societal values are reorganized and rearranged to hold the sacredness of life
Mm,
and to hold delight and curiosity about it, because I think that what's actually needed is super simple. It's respect for a pregnant body and a birthing body. It's time to heal. It's knowledge that it is community that holds a new family and a new baby, and
mm,
that there's time to do that before somebody is expected to go back to work or be managing 1,000 different things. Um, so I think it centers for me around, like, if we actually respect the truth of the body and the signals of the body, and we respect that relationships are primary to our health, and we respect that there's a time to receive and a time to give, and our systems centered around that, then I think that I would see what I want to see for families.
mm.
How we get there, I think, is what you described in that. How do we redirect our focus and our values and how we've created systems to go to that simplicity of respecting life?
Thank you so much, Kaylee. I so appreciate your time and your wisdom and your passion. And I'm so grateful that you came and shared with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for asking me. I'm glad to have you out there in the world working on this change together.
Right back at you. Thanks again.
My pleasure.